Welcome back to Mr. Question AI podcast. Ever get that feeling? You know that sense of wonder when you look up at the night sky and just think, is there something more out there?
It's a question that's haunted humanity for, well, pretty much forever.
And today we're taking a deep dive into one of the biggest ones. Does God exist?
We've got a whole bunch of sources to dig through: philosophy, science, even some pop culture takes on the big guy upstairs. Should be fun.
I'll be honest up front, I'm pretty skeptical.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, all the suffering in the world doesn't really mesh with the idea of an all-powerful, all-loving God, does it?
tough one for sure.
Plus, science has, come a long way in explaining stuff we used to chalk up to God.
Like what?
Disease, natural disasters, that sort of thing.
True. But even with all our scientific progress, the big question is still there. Where did it all begin? I mean, the Big Bang explains how the universe started, but what caused that initial explosion?
Right.
It's not like something can come from nothing, right?
Well, couldn't it be some, I don't know, some undiscovered law of physics? Do we really need to jump to God to explain it?
That's where the whole cosmological argument comes in.
Cosmo what now?
Basically, it says everything that begins to exist needs a cause. The universe had a beginning, meaning it needs a cause outside of itself. Something uncaused. Something eternal.
So you're saying that something is God. Couldn't it be like a multiverse or something we haven't even thought of yet?
Sure, tons of theories out there. But this cosmological argument really makes you think about the ultimate origin. Even if there's a multiverse, something had to kick that off too. Even with new physics, you'd still need to explain where those laws came from. It all points back to a first cause, something beyond what we currently get.
Okay, I see where you're going with that. What about the fine-tuning argument? Always felt a bit flimsy to me. Just because the universe seems perfect for life doesn't automatically mean it was designed that way, right?
It's not just that it's perfect for life, it's the sheer precision of it all. Imagine playing a video game and every single setting is perfectly balanced to make it amazing.
Sounds like my kind of game.
Wouldn't you think some seriously skilled developer was behind it?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah.
But couldn't we just be super lucky? Like we just happen to be in the one universe where everything worked out perfectly.
It's possible, but the odds of that are crazy low, like astronomically low. The universe's physical constants, things like gravity, the mass of an electron, they're so finely tuned that even a tiny variation would make life impossible. Saying it's just luck is like winning the lottery a billion times in a row.
Wow, okay. That does make you think about a designer. But doesn't this whole line of thinking put us in God of the Gaps territory? Like, what happens when science figures out how these constants work? Does God's role just keep shrinking?
The God of the Gaps idea is important to consider. But even if science explains how things are fine-tuned, it doesn't answer why. Why are the laws of physics the way they are? Why do they allow for life? Science might not be able to answer those.
Right, fine-tuning, getting more interesting than I thought. But the idea of a personal God, one who interacts with us and cares about our lives, that's where I really struggle.
That brings up the whole divine hiddenness thing. If God wants a relationship with us, why isn't it more obvious? Why do people search so hard and come up empty?
You're hitting on something I've thought about a lot, honestly. Sometimes it feels like I'm missing something, looking for something more, but it's just out of reach. But if God's there, why make it so hard?
A question that stumped theologians and philosophers for ages. Some say it's about free will, that God gives us the freedom to doubt or deny him. Others say faith requires trust, a willingness to believe even without proof.
So it's like a cosmic game of hide and seek.
Maybe. Or maybe it's more about the journey than the destination. Journey, huh? That's interesting. That whole yearning for something more, that's a big part of a lot of religious experiences.
But what about the people who do search, who really try but find nothing? That non-resistant non-belief thing we talked about before that really stuck with me. People who are like pouring their hearts out, praying, looking for some guidance or comfort, but just getting silence in return.
It's a tough one, no doubt about it. For some people, that's all the proof they need, that there's no God, or at least that he doesn't care. But for others, it kind of speaks to what faith is all about, that leap of trust, believing even when you have doubts.
I guess I can see that side of it, but it still feels a bit like a cop-out.
Yeah.
Like if God wants us to have this relationship, why make it so darn difficult?
Well, let's switch gears for a second. You up for tackling another argument for God's existence. This one's called the ontological argument.
Hit me with it. My brain's ready for a workout.
Okay, so it's a little abstract, but basically it says that if we can even imagine the greatest possible being, a being with every single perfection,
Okay, I'm following so far.
then that being have to exist.
Hold on, hold on. Just because I can imagine something doesn't make it real. Like, unicorns are awesome, but that doesn't mean they're out there frolicking in a magical forest somewhere.
True, but the ontological argument takes it a step further. See, it says that existence itself is a perfection. So if this greatest possible being didn't exist, it wouldn't actually be perfect. Therefore, it has to exist by definition.
Whoa, that's some next level thinking there. So just by thinking about this perfect being, we're somehow proving it exists.
Not quite that simple. People have been arguing about this one for centuries. Some philosophers buy it, others say it's mixing up existence with other qualities. But it does raise some interesting questions about our minds, our ideas, and what's actually real.
It's definitely food for thought. But even if we accept it, it doesn't tell us much about this greatest possible being. Does it even care about us? Is it involved in our lives at all?
Well, those are the questions that often lead people to religion, to try to understand this being and how we relate to it.
Which brings us to religion. And the moral argument, that one's always seemed shaky to me. Does morality really depend on God existing?
The moral argument says that there are objective moral values, things that are truly right and wrong, no matter what anyone thinks. So the question is, where do these values come from? Without God, wouldn't morality just be like personal preference or just cultural norms?
So no God, no ultimate right and wrong. But couldn't morality have come from, like, evolution?
Right.
As social creatures, we need cooperation and empathy to survive. So we develop moral codes that help us do that.
Totally. Evolutionary psychology sheds light on how moral behavior developed. But does it fully explain our sense of right and wrong, the desire for justice, or even self-sacrifice?
Good point. I mean, humans are capable of incredible good and terrible evil. If God sets the moral rules, why is there so much inconsistency?
And there we are, back at the problem of evil. It's like the biggest challenge to believing in a loving, all-powerful God. Why would a good God allow so much suffering?
Exactly. It's just so hard to square a benevolent deity with war, disease, all the bad stuff in the world.
Trust me, it's a question that's kept theologians and philosophers busy for a long, long time. Lots of proposed answers, but none of them totally satisfying. Some say free will is the key, even if it means people choose evil sometimes. Others say suffering can lead to growth, understanding, maybe even a greater appreciation for good.
I guess, but it kind of feels like they're just making stuff up. If God's all-powerful, couldn't he find a way to do all that without all the pain?
Maybe, but don't forget we're looking at this through human eyes. We're limited by what we know and experience. There might be parts of God's plan, his purpose, that we just don't get.
Yeah, true. I guess with questions about God, there's always going to be some mystery involved.
Totally. But that shouldn't stop us from asking the tough questions. Speaking of which, ready to get into some of the scientific views on this whole debate? Time to dive into cosmology, evolution, the origins of the universe.
All right, science time. Always been kind of fascinated by the Big Bang. Even just as a science thing, it's wild to think the universe had a beginning.
Definitely a game changer. The universe not always being there, that messes with some traditional ideas about God, timeless and eternal and all that.
For sure. Makes you wonder, if the universe had a start, what was there before? What caused it to, explode outward?
And we're back to that cosmological argument again. Some say the Big Bang itself kind of points to a creator, something outside of the universe, not bound by the same laws of physics we know.
Yeah, that first cause idea again.
Yeah.
But couldn't it be some kind of, quantum fluctuation? Or a universe that goes in cycles, expanding and then collapsing? Science is always finding new stuff, right?
True. Our understanding of the universe is constantly changing. But even with new discoveries, there's always that deeper question. What are the laws that run the whole show? Where did they come from? It's like there's always another layer to figure out.
Okay, I'm with you. But how do we fit this creator idea with evolution? Seems like those two are kind of at odds.
Evolution is huge GE in biology. It's how life got so diverse, changing over millions of years. But some folks say evolution doesn't automatically rule out a creator.
Really? How so?
Well, think of God like, I don't know, a master architect. They make the blueprints, lay the foundations, set the rules, then they step back and let things happen. Life evolves and adapts based on the principles they put in place.
So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's more like, how do they work together?
Exactly. Science and religion can be different ways of looking at the world. Science tells us how things work, the mechanics. Religion tries to answer WHY, like the meaning and purpose behind it all.
I get it. But there are still people who say evolution and creationism just can't mix.
Definitely. That's where the debate gets stuck a lot of the time. It comes down to how literally you take religious texts and how much you trust scientific evidence.
Speaking of evidence, what about the argument that science hasn't proven God exists yet? Maybe there's something out there that's just beyond what we can understand right now.
Right, science has to work with what we can observe, what we can measure, but just because we haven't found evidence doesn't mean something's not there. Some folks would say the very fact that the universe exists, that we exist, is a kind of evidence itself, like it points to something bigger than us.
That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about how much we still don't know. This whole deep dive has really shaken up what I thought and made me realize just how complex this whole question is.
That's the cool thing about these conversations. They make us think critically, question what we believe, and just embrace the mystery of it all. Whether you end up with more answers or more questions, it's a journey worth taking.
Totally agree. And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep digging into these questions. Read, research, talk about it, and most importantly, keep asking those questions. Finding truth, finding meaning. It's a journey we're all on together.
So next time you look up at the stars, just remember, the universe is full of incredible stuff, things we know and things we don't. And maybe, somewhere out there, is the answer to that big question, does God exist?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into one of life's biggest mysteries. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring the universe.